The U.S. government can fine you for over $16,000 per violation for something most Americans living abroad have never even heard of. And if they decide you did it willfully, that fine jumps to $165,000 or 50% of your entire account balance per violation. And on top of that, up to 250,000 in criminal penalties and 5 years in prison. I'm not exaggerating. This is federal law, and I've seen people get hit with penalties that exceeded what actually was in their accounts. If you have a foreign bank account and you've never heard of FBAR, then this video is for you. Now, the first time I navigated living abroad, I was 19 years old. There was no internet like we have it now, no YouTube, no Facebook. There was just a paper bulletin, and you wrote down what you needed to do. And there was nobody in my life that had done it before. I stood in an Italian government office, not fully understanding the language, filling out forms, having to return because I barely understood anything. And I figured it out line by line, mistake by mistake. Now, when I landed in Italy, again, I was only 19 years old. There was a bus that picked us up, took us straight to the government registration office via Natalia right after a 10-hour flight. No sleep, extremely jet lagged, hungry, desperate for a shower. And guess what? When we arrived at Via Natalia to register, there was another 4-hour line. And I remember people just giving up, lying down on the floor because they were exhausted. And you think there was food waiting for us? No, because we arrived midday, everything was closed. So, on top of the exhaustion, the jet lag, the desperation for a shower, and you were starving, when it was finally over and when I was finally processed and registered and stamped and cleared, you know what they handed us on our way home? A map, a paper map. Yep, we had to figure it out. Here is the thing nobody tells you before you go. When you move abroad, there's no one waiting on the other side with a roadmap to tell you what's next. When you land, you have to figure it out. And you can only figure it out when you are up to the next part of your journey. But not figuring it out or missing a step can cost you dearly. If you want to imagine moving abroad, the best way to conceptualize it is it's sort of like those Russian dolls where you open one layer and then there's another layer and there's another layer and there's another layer, and you can't get to the final layer until you disconnect the preceding layer. That's the only visualization I imagine because it's not something you could conceptualize or forecast because it depends on everyone's unique circumstances. But what I will say is that you have to be prepared to run up against multiple layers and prepare your nervous system that everything will not be figured out in one day, that there's stages, and that you will only discover what's next by discovering what's next. And you have to be patient regarding the process. Now, back to the content of this video. Not knowing about FBAR is exactly the kind of mistake that I want to bring to your attention. It doesn't matter how resourceful you are. If you don't know it exists, it's going to cost you dearly. I'm a New York licensed attorney. I have no family or ancestral connection to Italy, yet I bought a house for under $50,000 cash. And I'm navigating moving abroad and teaching other people how to move abroad since I've been doing this since I was 19 years old. And we didn't even have internet, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, all of that. Nothing but gumption is what got me through and being sensible. And so I built this channel because I'm the person I wish I had. I became the person I wish I had on the other side to tell me, you have to do this, this, and this, and this. And so let's talk about what you actually need to know. So what is FBAR? So FBAR stands for Foreign Bank Account Report. And the first thing you need to understand what it is not. It is not part of your regular tax return. It is not filed with the IRS. And most accountants who do not specialize in expat law do not even bring it up because they may not be aware of it. And that's exactly the problem. So FBAR is officially called FinCEN Form 114. FinCEN stands for Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, a bureau of the U.S. Treasury Department. It was created under the Bank Secrecy Act, a law originally designed to combat money laundering and tax evasion. You file this form 114 separately from your tax return through FinCEN's BSA e-filing system. It's completely free to file yourself. Now, here's what actually gets reported. It is a disclosure form, purely informational. You are telling the US government that you have foreign financial accounts. Filing it does not mean you owe additional taxes. It simply means the government knows your accounts exist. What accounts are we talking about? Bank accounts, brokerage accounts, mutual funds, essentially any financial accounts held outside of the United States. There are some exceptions, accounts held in IRAs, certain retirement plans, accounts at U.S. military banking facilities, but the vast majority of foreign accounts you open as an expat are required to be reported. So, who has to file? In plain English, if you are a US person, and that means a citizen or green card holder or resident alien, it does not matter where you actually live. If you fall under those three categories, you're required to file. And you're required to disclose or report your foreign financial accounts when they have a combined value that exceeds $10,000 at any point during the calendar year. Then you're required by federal law to file the FBAR, to file the FinCEN 114 form. So again, if you are a U.S. person, meaning citizen, green card holder, or resident alien, and you have a foreign bank account that at any time in the year exceeds $10,000, even if just for 1 minute it exceeds $10,000, you are required to report. That means if you, for example, have a Italian bank account and you had $10,000 and $1 in it on Tuesday in March, and it was down to zero by the Friday in that same month, you have to file. That means if you have three accounts, one with $4,000, one with $3,500, and one with $3,000, none of which actually individually exceeds 10,000, but together they add up to 10,500, you have to file. Now, this catches people completely off guard because you open a bank account to pay your rent, to pay your expenses, or you get paid by a foreign employer. You just want a simple local debit card for everyday life. You're not intentionally hiding money. You are not evading taxes. You just want to function as a human being in the country where you live. And suddenly you're subject to federal reporting requirements you never knew existed. So this applies to you. This also applies if you have a signatory if you have signature authority over a foreign account, even if it's not in your name. If you're an officer of a company with a foreign account and you have signing authority, then that's potentially reportable as well. Now, in terms of the deadlines, FBAR is due April 14th, the same day as your normal US tax return. However, this is important. They are completely separate filing systems. Remember, there's a site to file it, and I will link it in the description box. You can ask for an extension because they're separate filing dates. An extension on your tax return does not extend your FBAR requirements, and then an extension on your FBAR does not extend your tax return. The good news, though, is if you miss the April 15th deadline, there's an automatic extension to October 15th. So you don't need to request it separately. It is automatic. But October 15th is your hard stop. One more thing. Expats living abroad get an automatic 2-month extension on their tax return to June 15th. FBAR does not get that same extension. FBAR is April 15th, regardless of where you live, with the automatic extension to October 15th. But again, you file this separately. Your tax return is filed separately. The FinCEN 114 is a reporting, the website where you fill in the information. Now let's go back to the penalties, because this is where it gets really serious. The IRS divides violations into two categories, non-willful and willful, and the distinction matters enormously. A non-willful violation is when you genuinely did not know you were required to file. Maybe no one told you, maybe your accountant missed it, maybe you just had no idea this existed. The penalty for non-willful violation, $16,536 per violation. And thanks to a 2023 Supreme Court decision called Bitter versus United States, that's generally assessed per form, not per account. So if you miss 3 years of filing, you could be looking at $50,000 or more in penalties for something you didn't even know about. Now, willful violation is when the government determines you knew about the requirement and you chose not to comply and were reckless in not finding out. The penalty for willful noncompliance is greater than $165,000 or 50% of the account balance at the time of violation per year. So let me give you a real scenario. So say you've been living abroad for 5 years, you have a foreign bank account that averages $80,000. So maybe that's your average savings, your emergency fund, the money you're living on. And you never filed FBAR because no one told you existed. If the IRS determined your violations were willful and they have broad discretion in making that determination, then 50% of $80,000 is $40,000 times 5 years is $200,000 in penalties on top of what's already in the account, on money you already paid taxes on. And if they pursue criminal penalties on top of that, so we're looking at up to $250,000 in fines and 5 years in prison if it really gets bad. So I want to be clear, criminal prosecution is rare and typically reserved for the most egregious cases, but civil penalties for people who generally didn't know are quite draconian. And those happen every single day. Now, another layer of reporting as an expat has to do with FATCA, spelled FATCA. FATCA stands for the Foreign Account Tax Compliant Act because it works alongside FBAR, and most people don't know about it either. Now, FATCA requires foreign financial institutions like your Italian bank account, your Spanish brokerage, to report information about accounts held by U.S. persons directly to the IRS. Your bank is already reporting whether you know it or not. That is why the government's position is so firm. They already have the information. They're just waiting to see if you report it yourself. FATCA also requires U.S. persons with significant foreign financial assets to file Form 8938 with their tax return. The thresholds are higher than FBAR, generally $200,000 or more for expats filing as single, but if you exceed them, you file both forms, 8938 and the FinCEN 114 form. They're separate requirements from your tax return, and one does not replace the other. Now, here's some good news is that if you're watching this and you realize you've never filed an FBAR, I need you to take a breath because there are ways to fix this, but you need to act before the IRS contacts you first. The IRS does offer amnesty programs specifically for people in this situation who had no awareness of this law. The first is called the Streamlined Filing Compliance Procedures. Now, this is a design for people who non-willfully failed to comply, meaning you didn't know, and not that you were attempting to evade or to hide. And if you qualify, you simply certify that your failure was non-willful. You file the required back FBARs, however many years. You amend your tax returns for however many years. And for expats living abroad, the penalty may be zero. You come clean, you catch up, you move forward with no fines. Now, the second program is for the delinquent FBAR submission procedures for people who may owe no back taxes, but simply never filed the FBAR. If the IRS hasn't contacted you and you have no unreported income, you may be able to file late FBARs with a reasonable cause explanation and face no penalties at all. The critical caveat on both of these is that they are only available if the IRS has not already contacted you. Once you're under investigation and scrutiny, the window closes. This is why acting now, after the video, of course, matters. Here is what I want you to walk away with today. FBAR is not a trap for criminals. It is a reporting requirement that catches ordinary people, people who've moved abroad with the best of intentions, opened a bank account to pay rent, and simply did not know the rules. The government's position, however, has always been not knowing the law is not an excuse. Again, I was 19 years old figuring this out all alone. No lawyer, no guide, no family connections in Italy, standing in the cold. If only you knew how difficult it was back then. We had to wake up. If you wanted to get a visa, we had to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, travel on the train in the middle of the morning, early morning, before sunrise, to get to the Italian consulate, wait outside until 9 when they were ready to open. There were people who camped out, who came from other cities, who camped out in order to get the visa in the hopes that they will be able to get their paperwork processed. So I did this at 19 years old. And then once I landed in Italy, I was navigating in a foreign country with a paper map. When I became an attorney and I started understanding the full picture, FBAR, FATCA, foreign tax credit, visa requirements, healthcare, I realized that what most people moving abroad don't know could actually ruin them. Not because they're doing anything wrong, just because no one told them. And there's no one place with all of this information to say, after you do this, then you do this, and then you do this. Most people are watching Move Abroad, Fantasy Life, Day in My Life, My Groceries Are Cheap, or how to have income to move abroad, to be a digital nomad. But not any of that type of content is in one place. Rather, viewers are forced to like duct tape everything together and come up with a plan. But when you move abroad, you need an ironclad plan because there's no one waiting on the other side with a roadmap. That is the truth. That has always been the truth. And so I built the course Legal Abroad because I'm the person I wish I had. Not for people to chase fantasy, but for people who are really serious, people who know they want to make this move, but feel like something is missing. There's like a whole layer, like I said, those Russian dolls that they don't fully understand. That feeling is real because I felt it. It's called legal compliance, and it covers everything: visas, taxes, FBAR, FATCA, healthcare, what you need to know before you go and what you need to know when you're there, and how to stay legally protected while you build your life abroad. That's why even the name of the course is so important for me, Legally Abroad, because it gives you all of the information that you need to know before you move abroad and while you're abroad to remain compliant. That saves you thousands and thousands of dollars. The link for the course will be below. Now, if this video has helped you, if you know someone who's gearing up to move abroad, please share it with them because, again, the penalties could be costly. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.